Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of our molding series here on how we're making trim work for a whole house. It's the next day after our baseboard and I'm a little bit waterlogged actually. I just got cut out in the rain. We were shearing Christmas trees this morning and it started to rain. So it's nice and dry in here. So I'm gonna pick up part 2. Today we're making the casings and window trim for this particular order. So if you missed part 1, we did the baseboard and kind of overlaid what we're doing here. So you might want to go back and check out part 1 of this series to get caught up to speed. But where I'm at right now, I have all my casing trim here. The blanks are prepped, same way I prepped the blanks for the baseboard. So you can go back and watch how we did that. They went through the edger and then the planer to get them to the correct width and thickness for the molder. And now what I have to do, this is still set up for baseboard, but we're going to switch this over now for the casing, and this is a really easy switch over. It's actually why I'm running this stuff in the order I am, because this is going to stay exactly the same because our casing is like our baseboard. It just has an eased edge on both sides, so they match. They just need a little bit of change over here to take off this baseboard bottom knife and put in an eased edge, and I have to just adjust the width. So it should be pretty simple changeover. It should go pretty quick. So why don't we just get that done right away? Well, that did go pretty quick. Boy, I wish I would have learned that trick years ago. It would have saved me so much time. Now I realize I'm glossing over the setup here because I figure 90% of you guys and gals don't really care about the nuts and bolts of setting this machine up. But I'm sure there's probably a few people out there that would like to see a step-by-step on how I set the molder up. So if you are interested in that, let me know in the comments and I'll make a separate video just of setting up the molder step by step. If you run one of these machines or if you're curious about the machines, it might give you an idea of what's involved in that. But anyway, we're set up now for our 3-inch casing. I got my blanks ready to go. So we're gonna get fired up and we'll run a few pieces, or actually all the pieces here, and we'll keep on moving with this order. Okay, so here is where we're at. I have all the casing, the legs, so those would be the vertical parts. If you think of a window or a door and the casing that goes around them, the vertical parts, if you can see in this picture, that is what this is. So I just ran them and I have them all broken down and labeled by door and window. Now, I wouldn't typically do this. Typically, if you think of how casing is done, it runs up, it's mitered, top piece, and down. So I can just usually give a customer straight runs, just the lengths that work for them, and they'll cut and fit it on site. These windows and doors are much more complicated than that. There's quite a few different parts that are going into this to make the assembly. So in this particular case, I have papers and papers of dimensions here that I'm working through. And it's easiest for me just to separate them all out. And then as I do each part, like each sill, each crown, each cap, it'll just go with each particular window or door. That way I make sure I don't miss anything and it's all done. So in this case, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be cut right to exact length. These legs are actually 1 inch longer. That's what we decided for the customer. That's what he wanted, because that way he can do a perfect trim to fit on site. But some of these things, just because of the way they're machined, they're gonna have to be machined exact right here. So those are now done. And the next thing I have to do is the crown molding. There's a small 2-inch crown that goes along the top of the window or door. And I already took the time to set this up for crown molding. I already have these big old wing cutters in here. They're kind of a little bit scary when they get going. That's probably about the biggest cutter we run on this head. This is going to be the last part of this job that goes through this machine. The rest of it is all going to be handwork. So this is our last straight run of stuff through here. if this video seems a little disjointed, I'm actually filming this over 2 or 3 days. I'm kind of working on this job on the side in between other things I have going on here. So you'll notice I'm wearing a different shirt and stuff like that. So I'm trying to make it all seamless. I'm trying to not bore you to death with all these little details because this is a very intricate job. So I'm giving you the highlights here. So we're getting there. Now we're on the crown. Then it'll just be all the little trim pieces. That'll be handwork. I'll give you an overview of that and I'll show you the finished product. All right, so I have all the crown molding done. This is a piece of 2-inch crown. That's called a swan neck profile, very common. That's gonna cap off the tops of the doors and the windows really nice. And everything from here on out is just what I call flat stock. No real fancy profile. We went over this before. Most of this craftsman style has just an eased edge. It's just flat with an eased edge, so nothing complicated. And as you can see, I've got papers and pieces all over the shop here because I'm breaking this down by door and window because there's so many pieces to each one of these assemblies. It's the only way to make sure I get them all done and I'm not missing anything, and they all have to be cut to the right lengths. So it's a tedious process for this particular order. So what am I going to do here to machine all of these different parts and pieces? I could run them through the molder. That would be an option. I could run them through the shaper, another option, but I'm going to kick it old school. We're running just a router table. If you're a home woodworker, you're very familiar with this. It's probably a workhorse for you. Sometimes bigger isn't better. There's a lot of things you can do with the molder, but for these simple setups, all I'm doing is eased edges and roundovers. And quite honestly, the amount of time it takes me to set that molder up, I can do it way quicker, just feeding them by hand with the router table. So that's the way we're gonna do it. I have it set up here for eased edges, for the bottom aprons. We're gonna run that first, and then the window sills, fillet strips, freeze boards, and I can go on because there's so many parts to these doors and windows, but you get the picture. It's all going to be handwork here, just knocking the edges off and rounding over. So nothing super complicated. There's no fancy profiles left on this. It's just a matter of getting all the parts and pieces together so we can make the finished assembly. So that's what I'm going to start working on now. So guys, as a full disclaimer, don't try to work that fast, especially if you want to keep all your fingers attached. I'm just kidding. I got all 10. I plan to keep it that way. Knock on wood. Safety's no joke. You may have even noticed I was wearing a respirator. I started wearing a respirator years ago for just about everything. Especially, with the fine dust here generated by these cutters on the router and stuff like that. Down at the bandsaw mill in particular, a lot of fine dust. I was told something years ago that I believe to be true. It's the dust that you can't see is the dust that gets you. It's bad for your lungs. Somebody told me once, if you leave your shop and come back the next morning and you have a fine dust on your surfaces, you better be wearing lung protection. So everybody thinks of earmuffs and safety glasses, but I know many woodworkers, older woodworkers, that have lung problems from years of breathing in dust. So that's a serious note, nothing to fool around with. So you may catch me here as I'm trying to film stuff. I don't always throw it on if I'm trying to get a shot or something like that. So you might catch me. I'm not perfect, but I do try to wear the respirator as much as I can. So we're done with all the eased edge work. I got to switch this thing around. Next thing is a round over bit, which I have right here. It's just a little bit bigger. A round over bit to finish this off. I'm going to finish running the rest of these profiles, and then we're going to wrap this whole thing up. All these endless changeovers and different profiles and different sizes. I'm going to bring it back. We're going to wrap it all up. You're going to see the finished product and what we've been working on here this whole time. So I'll bring you back for that. All right, guys, I have it all wrapped up finally. After all those endless parts and pieces, I'll show you what we got here. It's all ready to go. I have every door and window banded separately and labeled so the customer can just take it into the house, put each piece in each room and work with it from there. So that should work really nice. I'm really happy with it. It was a fun project to do. A lot of parts and pieces to each assembly, but I think it's going to be worthwhile. It's going to make some beautiful trim for the customer. Molding really sets off a house, a room, and I think this trim, this ornate trim around the windows really will make it pop. So I need to cut in and interrupt myself here. In the first video, I showed you an overview of what the windows look like finished, and I forgot to include it here. So I figured I'd show a little shot of the finished product here so you can see what it looks like assembled, mocked up. You may have noticed in the first video, we did the baseboard. That's already gone, that's out of here. I delivered that to the customer a couple days ago so he could get started with installation. So he's busy with that, and now I'll give him a call, tell him this is ready to pick up. So I'm done with it. Now it's on to him. And I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I get to work with some of the best customers in the world. I feel like I meet a lot of really nice people. This gentleman was really nice, very knowledgeable on what he wanted. We were able to work together and come up with this setup, this trim work. And you know, like he said to me when we started out, it used to be you could go to a mom and pop lumber yard and they would do this service for you. They design the trim and make it. Nowadays, it seems everything is a big box store, and if it's not online in their computer or in a catalog that they can order it, they don't want to be bothered. But that's kind of what I do here. We still do old-fashioned customer service. I'll work with you. You bring me what you're looking to make, and I'll do everything I can to make it. You know, we do all kinds of custom work here, which that brings me to my next point. I need to get this shop cleaned out because tomorrow I start the next project. So stay tuned, subscribe so you don't miss that. That'll be coming up. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's going to be a real fun one. I think you'll find it very interesting. It is 100% different than what we just did with this trim order. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, but it's going to be a neat project. And the only little teaser I'll give you, it's going to be out of walnut. So stay tuned, stick around, and that'll be coming up here shortly. And I hope to see you there. Thanks, guys.